How is it going, fight fans? Joey G from Wrestling Headlines, and I am once again joined by a very special guest. He is an MMA legend, a former heavyweight champion, and the brainchild of one of the most exciting pro wrestling events, Bloodsport. I am speaking today with Mr. Josh Barnett. Mr. Barnett, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing well.
Doing well. We are very happy to have you. You know, I always like to start these interviews off with kind of a fun topic, a fun conversation. You know, we've all had a rough year, so why don't we ease our way into this talk? I saw in an interview that you are a big cinephile and even named Blade Runner as one of your favorite movies, which excellent choice. What did you think, if you happen to have seen it, of the newest Blade Runner 2049? You think they expanded on that idea with these replicants in a fun way?
I actually really liked 2049, and what was that? I think that came out in 2019, or was it
2019, I believe, or 2018,
yeah.
2019. Yeah,
it was probably my favorite movie of that year as far as of those releases. And while not perfect, and it did not have the same noir elements of the original Blade Runner, still I felt like it stayed on path, I think, with how you might see that world unfold with continuing advancement, how the world might look outside of Los Angeles. And I really liked the fact of using the character as Kay to delve into the more of the question of, you know, what does it mean to be alive and human, and the fact that he gets used as a pawn throughout the whole thing. Yet when it all comes down to it, even the replicant revolution, that is just as much as manipulative, self-absorbed sort of cause as anybody else that they're against, he decides to not help them either, because it wasn't really about their side or anybody else's side. It was what he felt like was doing the best thing that he could do for, you know, the daughter. Well, really the impetus of this whole thing, that the daughter of Deckard and the replicant, which is such a monumental advancement in the idea of this whole process. But then again, also that whole concept brings up more questions about, well, okay, where does life start and begin, and how does that include tech and AI and non-biologically derived life, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, man. I mean, you know, it was one of my favorite movies that came out that year, and I thought the director Denis Villeneuve, especially working with the cinematographer Roger Deakins, really did kind of capture something, a similar aesthetic to the world that Ridley Scott built. And I agree with you. I thought a lot of the ideas kind of just built upon Deckard's original story. And I know you said you were a big Final Cut fan from the original one too. So I was just curious to get your thoughts, because it is a really, really unique film to label as one of the best. I still think it's one of the best sci-fi movies ever made. So I was just curious to see, because I personally like 2049 even better than the original. But
I wouldn't go that. I wouldn't go that
far. I promise. If you promise not to put me in a triangle, I will change.
No, definitely. You're completely capable of having whatever opinion you want on it. But no, I mean, I really love 2049, and I do like it as a companion piece as much as me and my buddy IQ Wrestler will fight to the death over it. But I also enjoyed the performance by Jared Leto, even though a lot of folks that are aren't very hot on this film love to just rail against Jared Leto. But I like the fact that he played it as this guy who is like seemed like incredibly maybe stricken, like Aspie, kind of unemotional, like an extreme version of that. And therefore, you know, the way he could be a stand-in for the idea of material, like in the terms of philosophy, the materialist worldview taken to an extreme. And I just thought it was really well done, and it fit in with what that environment was. And I like the way that they did his little headquarters. I mean, so stark brutal and minimal. It was pretty rad.
100% agree. And really, his performance was the one that reminded me most of Rutger Hauer from the original film. Obviously, we didn't get the classic improvised Tears in the Rain line, but I thought he, and in a totally different way, he didn't mimic anything that was done in the original film. I agree with you. He solo and identified this character completely on his own.
I would actually argue that Rutger Hauer's character, even being a replicant, showed far more humanity than Leto's character did.
Wow.
Leto's character is almost the most devoid of humanity of the Blade Runner series. He has almost no consideration of what life and death and love and these kind of things are not in his wheelhouse. Whereas the thing about the Nexus Sixes in the original Blade Runner is, as they continue to be in the world, they couldn't help but be a part of it and have it affect them to bring out these human characteristics. You know, I mean, even in Rutger Hauer, part of the reason why he wants to live longer is because he feels like he's being cheated of a life he's now just finally capable of understanding and experiencing.
I love your input on the movie, man. I look forward to talking about more films with you in the future. Let's talk a little bit now about the pro wrestling MMA aspects of your career. You began early in the wrestling world working with New Japan. Way back in the day, you had this big high stakes matchup against Yuji Nagata. Do you have any fond memories of getting to work with a Japanese legend like Nagata?
Nothing but. I so much so that I long to try and get him in the ring again before we're both too old to do this anymore. It was a great introduction into professional wrestling, and a rough one too, by getting exploder suplexed and pinned. But he is as much of a professional as I would have expected, and as somebody that saw him in New Japan and watched him in WCW, and to say that, okay, this is the guy that you're going to be across the ring from in your first ever professional wrestling match. It's a pretty amazing experience.
It's good to hear, man. And might I just say, having that being one of your earliest matchups, I think you blend into that world quite well, quite easily. I think that transition showed that you 100% belonged in the ring next to Nagata. No one was carrying anybody. You two were viable opponents. And it's interesting because at that point, New Japan kind of had this MMA sort of phase that they were going into. And Tom Lawler, another guy who's done both MMA and pro wrestling, recently spoke with New Japan about how the training for both of these things, although different, like he considers them one mindset. He doesn't consider them two separate ideologies in training. Can you kind of weigh in on that? Like when you're training MMA or when you're training wrestling, do you have a different ideology or a psychology going into it?
No, when it came to, well, I mean, I'll put it this way. So that match with Nagata, I didn't have any training. I just did it. And the quote unquote training was, I already knew how to fall from judo and from wrestling a good portion of my life and fighting. I already knew how to suplex and throw and do all these kind of things. I mean, none of that. I didn't need to be taught to do any moves. There was no interest. There was no need for any of that. And I hadn't worked out a whole bunch of stuff with Nagata, but we just did it. There was like a little bit of time spent in training, and like it was 2 days before the match. That's it. Everything else, I mean, it was just came natural. And when I would go on tours, I would learn on tour as much as I could from all the amazing wrestlers there. But I would show up to tour. I would just train MMA and be in shape and be ready to go. And with the people that I train as wrestlers, I spend 90% of the time just doing the same catch wrestling and MMA training as I do always. And then there may be 10% that could be called distinct to what people would think of as professional wrestling. And that's about it.
Well, I'd just like to praise you and say that your catch style has obviously, been adopted by the people that you've trained, like a Shayna Baszler, people that are finding success. So it's really, really cool to see like fingerprints of your work kind of all over the wrestling scene now. Now, speaking of your fingerprints, Bloodsport has become like a, an event that gets the pro wrestling circuit talking every time one is coming up. I believe you've held 5 events now, with a 6th one getting ready to air. Now, out of those events, you've had your hand in all of them and competed at several of them. What would you say out of the 5 events that have taken place have been the most standout performances and or matches in your mind, at least?
Well, it's going to be tough to get past stuff from 4 and 5 just because it's so fresh on the mind. But I know one thing I noticed about as these blood sports continue, and as we have participation by, or that's not the way to put it, as we have some repeated participation by athletes, everybody who continues to work to be in Bloodsport only gets better every single time. I have not seen anybody come back to my ring worse at what we're doing. It's never the case. And some of these guys like Chris Dickinson are starting to become like a very unique thing in the world of wrestling, where they are becoming close to being experts at working at being in something like Bloodsport, and where it is very difficult for me to find the appropriate athletes for this kind of event. And of course, you always want to have a lot of you want to have some sort of discernment anyways, because there's something that you're trying to create from your show, that you want it to be unique to what you do and not the same as everybody else's. So it's not just enough to say, well, oh, this guy's been hashtagged and this guy's being talked about. Well, oh, just book them, just throw them in there, and instead be very specific about who you're using, why you're using them, and what way you're going to use them under that umbrella of what your show is supposed to represent, what your show is supposed to exhibit to the world that is unique about it. And people like Dickinson have shown, seeing him in the first Matt Riddle's Bloodsport all the way on up, it's just, I mean, the guy, you think, if I would say, if you're an indie wrestling fan and you think who Chris Dickinson is completely and what he does, I can tell you the guy just continues to evolve. And so things like that make me very proud of the arena that we've created for these athletes. But then, Jeff Cobb was an absolute natural for Bloodsport. Kratos, Grimm, Simon Grimm is someone that is more key to what we're doing than people might even be aware of. And honestly, even if somebody goes into Bloodsport for the first time, let's say, and they feel like they've maybe they feel like they didn't hit the mark as tightly as they could have. I just, if they've got the right mentality, if they're really serious about it, I know that if I keep bringing them along, they will only continue to improve. And I've just seen such steady improvement from everybody, which is great to me, because I don't want anyone to leave my ring worse than when they showed up. I mean, they're going to be worse for wear, but I don't want them to be a worse wrestler. And I want this to be the kind of thing that if you trust us, if you trust me, and you get into this, you step up for this event, and you listen and you be a part of it, you'll go to the next thing a better wrestler. And as you continue to go through all your other bookings, if you can take some of what we're doing here, you will get better from every place you go. And that's it's about building, not just being an alternative product to what you normally see, or even in any case, not being a not being any kind of a rival to these things, but just being something just on its own. And that's what I create for. I'm not trying to be contentious to the rest of the world of indie wrestling or pro wrestling. I want to just be us to our best ability, and that's it. Let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, and I think Bloodsport has done an excellent job of showcasing that, especially when you see some bigger named wrestlers that have competed, and they are not only growing in this particular style that Bloodsport puts out, but it has helped them grow. I think about Killer Cross and the match that he had with Davey Boy Smith Jr. At the first Bloodsport, and now watching how Cross has just elevated himself in NXT, it's incredible to see because he's got he's got the lore of Bloodsport in his past. So it was amazing to see. And I agree with you to see these people grow, especially a Chris Dickinson, who I know you've stepped onto the mat with. And it's incredible. Now, I only got one more question for you, and I'm excited to hear your response because we're talking about Bloodsport, and there's a big Bloodsport fight coming up between you and Jon Moxley, a very highly anticipated bout that was supposed to happen back at Bloodsport 2 for reasons it could not happen, back at Bloodsport 3 for reasons it could not happen. And finally, you're going to have your hands on a guy who, if we're talking about, has improved since he attended the first Bloodsport as an attendee and seeing where he has gone since then. That guy has only been on a skyrocket up. So you are going to be facing the top Jon Moxley in the game. How do you, Josh Barnett, prepare for an opponent like Jon Moxley?
It's kind of similar to the way things were in the early days of MMA, where you didn't even know who you would be fighting half the time, and even if you had a name, you wouldn't maybe know much about where they came from, what their experience was, and there were so many unknowns. And quite often you would meet a guy in the ring that would just, whatever you think, if you think they're gonna, where they should zig, that they'll zag. If you think they're always sure to surprise you in some way. And for me, that excitement of the unknown is what I see with Moxley. And you're right, he's only getting stronger. That's the thing. Watching him and Davey Boy Smith Jr. clash in clearly one of the best matches we've had in these events so far, and one that has even been called match of the year by a lot of people early on, leading into this. I know that I'm not going to get a guy who's going to be lacking in any way from his best ability. As far as Mox is concerned and how he fights and what he does, he's only thriving in that bit that is Jon Moxley, doing death matches and fighting guys in AEW and all over, and coming to Bloodsport. He's just getting tougher. And to be honest, that's exactly the way I want it. I don't want to be in the ring with any reduced version of him. I don't want to see a version that's even been perhaps tamed in a way, like streamlined into a more typical, more typically trained and structured fighter. I want the guy that will absolutely go left when we normally would right, would duck instead of dodge. That I want that dude.
I hear you, man. Well, we all very, very much look forward to when that showdown happens. Sorry, just one last little add-on question to that. In Bloodsport 1, you took on another very unpredictable star like Jon Moxley in Minoru Suzuki. Do you see, those two have always been compared just because of their absolute craziness and balls to the wall, anger and aggression that they show that a lot of fans have been attracted to. Do you see the similarities in preparing for Moxley after already having faced Suzuki?
Not a lot, but then part of that is because of my own personal experience with Suzuki, where I've trained with, we used to train together on tours.
Oh,
and so him and I would spend time in the ring just working over stuff and exchanging techniques, rolling live, all that kind of. So we had an understanding of who each other were. Plus, all the years of seeing Suzuki as a competitor from the outside as well gave me a lot of tape and a lot of ways to know what to expect, which was all out fury and destruction from one of the best professional wrestlers in the world. I know that Moxley is going to be harder for me to approach in a very systematic way, because he's bound to break out of whatever whatever pattern I would expect.
Mm-hmm.
And that unknown is interesting to me. That and the fact that the guy seems to have no quit in him. So I have to wonder, what is it going to take to try and finally keep him down, or to make him give up? If he just lets me heel hook him and tear his leg out, but he just keeps going, okay. I mean, there's something about that is, one, it may seem foolish, but two, it also shows you that at any moment the guy will figure out a way to win. And I want to know what that's like.
Sure. Well, listen, if there is one fighter on this world who I have confidence can do that, it is you, sir. Thank you so very much for joining me, Joey G from Wrestling Headlines. Is there anything you'd like to plug before we get out of here?
I mean, always keep track of what's going on with me on social media, Twitter and Instagram with @JoshL Barnett. You can also go to joshbarnett.com, which is a fantastic website with information on Bloodsport, information on Warbringer whiskey, which is my whiskey brand, and everything that I'm involved in. So, and be sure to check out Bloodsport 4 and 5 at bloodsport.watch to see some of the best professional wrestling, the hardest hitting professional wrestling in the world.
Absolutely. And if I could just plug it too, your match with Suzuki right now is available on Game Changer Wrestling's YouTube. Please, if you're listening, go check that out because it's still one of Bloodsport's top contests in my mind. Mr. Barnett, thank you so very much again. And we look forward to seeing you, what you do in the future.
Thanks.